I'm Natalie. I'm 27. 6 weeks ago, I was just a kindergarten teacher living paycheck to paycheck. Then came the lawyer's voice. We hereby bequeath our entire estate to our beloved granddaughter, Natalie Grace Foster. $26 million. The room froze. My father shot to his feet, chair clattering. "Let me see that," he barked, snatching the paper. My mother hissed, "Kh." A kindergarten teacher? She can't manage that kind of money. Jason slammed his hand on the table. Aunt Pam flushed scarlet. Uncle Steve looked at the floor. I couldn't move. My grandparents, who drove the same truck for decades and clipped coupons for fun, had left me everything. "There's more," the lawyer said, pressing play. The screen lit up with my grandparents sitting side by side. My chest ached. "If you're watching this," Grandpa began, "it means we've passed. Richard, Pam, we love you, but we're disappointed in the values you've chosen. Natalie has shown us integrity. She visits because she cares, not because she wants. They trusted me. Me." The video ended. My father exploded. "Garbage! We'll contest this!" "They were tested," the lawyer replied. "Doctors certified their competence." My mother leaned forward, voice suddenly sugar. "Natalie, darling, you'll share it with us, won't you?" Jason scoffed. "There's nothing to think about." The lawyer slid me an envelope. "You don't need to decide today." Outside, drizzle slicked the sidewalk. My father gripped my arm hard enough to bruise. His voice dropped to a hiss. 6 o'clock. At our house. We settle this. That's not a request. If you've ever watched money strip the mask off family, you know the chill. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more stories about standing your ground when family shows their true colors, hit like and subscribe. Because at 6 that night, I would learn what family really meant when the doors closed. The rain had lifted by the time I parked in front of my parents' house that evening, but the gray sky pressed down like a weight. Their sprawling mansion rose above me, all granite and glass, meant to impress but never to welcome. I clutched the envelope Matthew had given me, palms damp, and stepped inside. They were waiting in the formal living room, a space that smelled faintly of polish and staged perfection. My father stood near the fireplace, glass of scotch in hand. My mother perched on a stiff designer chair, lips tight, eyes sharp. Jason sprawled on the sofa, scrolling on his phone, smugness radiating. Aunt Pam paced, voice already pitched high with irritation. Uncle Steve stood near the window, silent as always, eyes somewhere far away. "Sit down, Natalie," my father ordered, not bothering with pleasantries. I chose a chair close to the door. "Let's be reasonable," he said, voice sliding into his business negotiation tone. "Your grandparents weren't thinking clearly. They meant for the family to benefit, not just you." My mother leaned forward, tone syrupy. "Sweetheart, your father has the experience to handle this. You can still keep a nice portion, maybe a down payment on a real house instead of that apartment." Their words were daggers disguised as gifts. Dad's voice hardened. "Here's the proposal. You sign everything over to me as head of the family. I'll distribute it fairly. You'll get 10%, generous considering your limited needs." Jason smirked. "More than enough for a teacher," Aunt Pam chimed in. "The house should go to us. We've got 3 children to think about." Her kids hadn't set foot in that house in years. When demands failed, guilt took the stage. My mother's eyes glistened. "After all we've done for you, private school, braces, lessons, this is how you repay family loyalty?" Loyalty. The word twisted in my gut. Then the mask dropped. "You either sign voluntarily," Dad said, voice sharp, "or we contest the will. We'll drag out every private conversation, every visit. It will get ugly." I heard Grandpa's voice in memory. "No one can take your dignity unless you give it away. Hold firm, Natalie." By 9, Jason was drafting transfer documents, Mom calling their attorney, Aunt Pam browsing real estate listings. They divided up what wasn't theirs, not once mentioning my grandparents' wishes. At 10:30, Dad slid a stack of papers and a pen across the coffee table. "Sign." The language was broad, signing away all rights to everything. I pushed the paper back. "No." Silence fell heavy. "What did you say?" My father's voice was low, dangerous. I said no. Grandma and Grandpa trusted me for a reason. I'll honor them. The explosion came instantly. Mom screaming, Jason throwing insults, Aunt Pam crying loudly about her children. But through it all, I clung to that word like armor. Finally, Dad's glass cracked against the hearth. He stalked toward me, fingers stabbing the air. Either you sign and remain part of this family, or you walk out with that money and consider yourself disowned. You can't have both. I looked around, searching for love, for family. There was none. I won't sign, I said, standing, voice steady even as my knees shook. Then get out, Dad snarled. I live in my own apartment, I reminded him. He laughed coldly. The apartment we co-signed? We own the building. Your lease is done. The floor dropped out from under me. You have 30 minutes, Mom added, glancing at her watch. Pack essentials. Locks change tomorrow. Jason grinned. Better hurry, sis. $26 million won't keep you warm tonight. I packed in a daze. 30 minutes isn't time to pack a life. Clothes, toiletries, papers, stuffed into duffel bags. Dad leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, a guard watching a prisoner. Mom's voice carried from downstairs, already on the phone with a realtor about my grandparents' house. You were never really family, Dad said coldly. We nearly divorced before you. You were an obligation that kept us together. Mom appeared beside him. All that money we wasted, school, braces, camps, you were a bad investment. Jason's voice joined in, smug. You'll regret this. Money runs out, you'll crawl back. I zipped my final bag, grabbed Grandma's quilt, and walked past them. No one moved to help. They stood in a line at the door, faces twisted in anger, disappointment, triumph. You might have money now, Mom said, but family is forever. You'll see what you've thrown away. I'm not the one throwing away family, I whispered. You are. I stepped out into the night. The door slammed behind me. In the driveway, everything caved in. I was disowned, homeless, alone. I collapsed into my car, sobs shaking my body, tears blurring the wheel. I cried for my grandparents, for the family I'd never truly had, for myself. When I finally stilled, I remembered the envelope. Inside, keys, dangling from Grandma's rabbit-shaped keychain. The house was mine now. I drove through dark streets until their porch light appeared, glowing as if waiting. My hands trembled, unlocking the door. The house smelled of lemon verbena and wood polish. Silence pressed in. I dropped my bag in the guest room. The novel I'd left weeks earlier sat on the nightstand. Towels folded by Grandma waited on the dresser. Her thoughtfulness undid me. I lay on the bed and cried until sleep came. Morning light was cruelly bright. My phone buzzed nonstop. Threats from Dad, sugar from Mom, sneers from Jason. I scrolled through until one message froze me. Enjoying the big empty house? Not for long. Tomorrow at 10, we're coming to collect what's ours. Better not try to stop us or things will get ugly. The words made my stomach clench. I sat in that familiar kitchen, phone trembling in my hand, realizing the fight wasn't over. My family was coming. And ugly was about to arrive at my door. The text from Jason sat on my phone screen like a threat carved in stone. Enjoying the big empty house? Not for long. Tomorrow at 10, we're coming to collect what's ours. Better not try to stop us, or things will get ugly. My hands shook as I stared at it. Ugly. The word churned in my gut. I forwarded the message to Matthew, my grandparents' attorney, with trembling fingers. His reply came instantly. Stay where you are. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Do not open the door to anyone else. The urgency in his words scared me almost as much as Jason's threat, but it also gave me a strange sense of relief. At least someone was on my side. 30 minutes later, headlights swept across the driveway. I peeked through the curtain before opening the door. Matthew stepped out of his sedan, silver hair damp from the misty morning, briefcase in one hand, a cardboard tray with 2 coffees in the other. I ushered him inside. He set the tray down on the kitchen table where my grandparents and I had once eaten countless Sunday dinners. First things first, he said, sliding a coffee toward me. Your family has already contacted 3 attorneys about contesting the will. I expected as much. I've prepared countermeasures. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, desperate for something solid. They kicked me out last night, I admitted, voice shaking. My father owns my apartment building through one of his companies. I had no idea. I don't even have a home anymore. Matthew nodded grimly. Classic Richard, using leverage to force compliance. What he didn't tell you is that your grandparents anticipated this exact scenario. He opened his briefcase, pulling out a deed. 5 years ago, your grandmother purchased a cottage outside of town. It was placed in a separate trust for you. Richard doesn't know it exists. If you need a safe place, you have one. Relief surged through me. For the first time since yesterday, I could breathe. but the thought of hiding while my family circled like vultures made my skin prickle. "There's something else," Matthew continued. "Your grandparents left more than money. They left a shield. People who loved them, who knew the truth about your father, your brother, all of them. You're not as alone as you feel." A knock rattled the back door just then. I stiffened. Matthew gave a small smile. "That should be Carlos." "Carlos?" "Carlos Ramirez, your grandparents' estate manager and handyman for 15 years. I opened the door cautiously. A man in his early 50s stood there, hat in his hands. His eyes were kind, lined from years of sun and labor. "Miss Natalie," he said warmly, "I'm sorry for your loss. They were good people. I saw your car this morning and wanted to check if you needed anything." The simple kindness almost undid me. "Thank you, I'm overwhelmed." Carlos nodded. "Mr. Harold and Mrs. Elizabeth worried about that. They asked me to look after you if anything happened. The house, the grounds, they're all maintained. I've been keeping watch." We sat at the table. Carlos shared stories I'd never heard. My grandfather fixing trucks late into the night. My grandmother teaching him how to bake her lemon bars when his wife was ill. His loyalty was steady, the kind my father never understood. Then his expression grew serious. "There's something you need to know. After the funeral, your father and brother came here. They took watches, jewelry, electronics. I have it on the cameras." I froze. Cameras? Of course. My father had installed a system years ago, supposedly for protection. Carlos shook his head. "Mr. Harold didn't trust it. Too many blind spots. He had me update the system last year. Everything is recorded and backed up." Matthew scribbled a note. "That footage will be very useful if they push this legally." But Carlos wasn't done. Mrs. Elizabeth kept journals. She wrote everything, family visits, conversations, the good and the bad. They're in her study. We followed him to the study, a cozy room lined with shelves. Carlos pulled down a leather-bound book, dated neatly on the spine. I opened to a random page. My grandmother's elegant handwriting filled it. May 15, Richard visited today. First time in 7 months. He didn't ask about our health, launched into a pitch for cryptocurrency investment, $250,000 needed. When Harold refused, Richard accused us of favoring Natalie, said she was only visiting to secure her inheritance. Couldn't be further from the truth. Natalie never asks for money. She brings food every Sunday. She is our joy. Tears blurred the ink. I flipped through entry after entry. Each documented moments of neglect, demands, insults, my father's threats, Jason's failed schemes, my mother's disdain for their simple lifestyle, and in between, lines about me, my visits, my gifts of cookies, helping with new phones, the joy I brought them. They had seen me, truly seen me. A second knock sounded at the front door. Carlos went to answer. He returned with an older woman in a practical dress and cardigan. "Dorothy Reynolds," he said, "your grandparents' housekeeper for 20 years. She wrapped me in a hug that smelled of lavender soap. You look just like Elizabeth when she was young. She was so proud of you." Dorothy joined us at the table, hands folded tightly. "Your father and mother, they never came here to visit, only to take. Elizabeth knew it. She asked me to watch carefully. I kept notes, too." She opened her purse and pulled out a worn notebook. The evidence was piling higher than I could process. Within hours, more people arrived. Rosa Martinez, my grandparents' longtime business partner, brought folders explaining the company's operations. She promised to guide me through Alexander Logistics, the empire my grandparents had built. George Patel, their investment advisor, appeared with thick binders detailing portfolios, assets, and accounts. Sarah Johnson, their neighbor for 3 decades, carried a casserole and stories of neighborhood gatherings I'd half forgotten. One by one, they sat in the living room. Each brought a piece of my grandparents' life, memories, affection, evidence of just how deeply my family had failed them. As the house filled, it no longer felt empty. Late in the afternoon, Dorothy, sorting through drawers in my grandmother's desk, gasped softly. She pulled out a hidden compartment. Inside were letters, decades of them, each from my father, demanding money, threatening to cut off contact with me if they refused, and a small USB drive. "Security footage," Dorothy explained. "Your mother went through Elizabeth's jewelry before the reception even ended. She took pieces, claiming Elizabeth wanted her to have them." My chest tightened. My grandparents had prepared for this. Every cruelty, every theft, every manipulation was documented. They hadn't just left me wealth. They had left me protection. By 4 o'clock, papers covered the dining table. Journals, letters, financial statements, photographs. The weight of it all pressed down, but beneath the fear was something else. Resolve. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Jason. Hope you're enjoying Grandma and Grandpa's house while you can. Dad, Mom, Aunt Pam, Uncle Steve, and I are coming tomorrow morning at 10. We'll collect what belongs to us. Better not try to stop us, or things will get ugly. I showed the message to Matthew. His face darkened. This is no longer just family drama, he said. It's a threat. Your grandparents knew this day would come. They left instructions for it. Tomorrow, we'll be ready. He made several calls, speaking quickly, using words I barely understood. Restraining orders, cease and desist letters, witness coordination. When he finished, he looked at me with steady eyes. Your grandparents built more than wealth, Natalie. They built a community. That's their true legacy. And tomorrow, that community will stand with you. The house quieted as evening fell. Dorothy hummed softly in the kitchen. Carlos checked locks and windows. Rosa spread financial charts across the table. Matthew stacked legal documents in neat piles. I sat at the center of it all, journals in my lap, my grandmother's handwriting under my fingertips. For the first time, I felt equal to the responsibility. I would not let them down. But as the clock ticked toward midnight, Jason's message burned in my mind. Tomorrow at 10. Ugly. I didn't know what form their ugliness would take. Lawsuits, threats, or something worse. All I knew was that at 10 o'clock the front door would rattle and my family would try once again to take everything. And this time, I would not be standing alone. The house felt different the next morning, charged, tense, like the air before a storm. I woke before dawn, heart pounding, unable to shake Jason's words. Tomorrow at 10. Ugly. By 8 o'clock, Matthew arrived with his usual calm demeanor, though the briefcase in his hand and the stack of folders he carried told me he'd prepared for battle. He set down coffee and pastries in the kitchen as if it were any other morning, but his voice was firm. These, he said, laying out a folder, are restraining orders ready to file if necessary. And these are cease and desist letters addressing the threats your brother made. You'll hand them to him directly if it comes to that. I nodded, fingers trembling as I traced the envelope's edge. Dorothy bustled in next, apron tied tight, frying bacon as though comfort could be conjured from the smell. Eat, she ordered gently. Whatever happens today, you need your strength. By 9, the house began to fill. Carlos stood watch by the front door, his broad frame steady as stone. Rosa set up her laptop on the dining table, spreadsheets and documents ready to project if needed. George, the financial advisor, flipped through binders, highlighting key points. Even Sarah from next door stopped by with muffins and a firm pat on my shoulder. It felt less like an ambush waiting to happen and more like an army forming, an army of people who truly loved my grandparents. Still, fear gnawed at me. My palms were slick. Every creak of the old house made me flinch. At 9:45, tires crunched on gravel. One car, then another. By 9:50, the long driveway was clogged with luxury vehicles. My father's black sedan, my mother's pristine SUV, Aunt Pam and Uncle Steve's flashy convertible, Jason's bright sports car, every one of them polished to gleam like a statement. They're early, Matthew murmured, trying to catch us unprepared. My chest tightened. The first pound rattled the front door. Jason's voice boomed, "Open up, Natalie. Quit hiding." Carlos turned the lock and pulled the door open just wide enough. My father stood at the threshold, face hard. The others loomed behind him, anger written in every line of their bodies. "Where is Natalie?" Dad barked. "This is family business." Carlos didn't flinch. "Miss Natalie is expecting you. Please, come in." They swept inside like a storm, filling the foyer with perfume, cologne, and hostility. My mother's eyes darted immediately to the table piled with documents, then narrowed at the sight of Rosa with her laptop. "What is this?" she demanded. "You brought outsiders into a private matter?" I stood in the center of the room, Matthew slightly behind me, the others arrayed around us. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. "You're not entitled to this," Dad snapped, striding toward me. "You manipulated them. This ends now," Jason sneered. "Better hand it over before it gets messy." My knees wobbled, but I forced myself to hold my ground. Grandma and Grandpa made their wishes clear. This isn't about what you want. "Wishes?" Aunt Pam scoffed. "They were senile. Everyone knows it." "They were tested," Matthew cut in, voice even, "certified competent by multiple doctors." Jason rolled his eyes. "Paperwork, who cares? We'll take what's ours." The shouting rose, words overlapping, accusations flying. My father's face reddened. My mother's voice sharpened to a shriek. Jason jabbed a finger inches from my chest. I could barely breathe. I wanted to run, to disappear into the safety of my grandparents' memory, but I remembered my grandfather's words again. Stand your ground. So I stood. Still, fear gnawed at me. My throat was dry, palms clammy. For a terrifying moment, I thought they might physically drag me from the house. And then the front door opened again. The room went silent as 3 figures stepped inside. First was Judge Robert Henderson, tall, dignified, with silver hair and a stern gaze. I recognized him instantly. My grandparents had spoken of him often, a friend for decades. Next came Police Chief Maria Williams, uniform crisp, eyes sharp, authority radiating from her presence. Last was Thomas Jang, my grandparents' trusted financial advisor of 20 years, briefcase in hand. My father's face drained of color. "Robert," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. What a surprise. The judge didn't return it. His voice was calm but carried the weight of finality. "I am here at the request of Harold and Elizabeth Alexander, through their attorney. They asked me to serve as an impartial witness in the event of any dispute regarding their estate." My mother bristled. "This is ridiculous. Why is law enforcement here? We're here to collect family heirlooms that rightfully belong to us." Chief Williams crossed her arms. "I'm here as a friend of the Alexanders. Unless, of course, someone commits a crime, then I'll be here in my official capacity." Her smile was thin. The implication was clear. Behind me, Rosa closed her laptop with a click and stepped forward. Carlos shifted slightly, solid as stone. Dorothy wiped her hands on her apron and moved closer. One by one, the people my grandparents had trusted most positioned themselves behind me like a wall. For the first time, I saw hesitation flicker across Jason's face. "This is absurd," Dad muttered, but the confidence had slipped. The silence stretched, heavy with tension. The luxury cars sat gleaming in the driveway outside, the breakfast smell of bacon still lingering in the air, but the atmosphere was thick as lead. I swallowed hard. My voice trembled, but I forced the words out. "You think you can bully me into giving you what you want, but you're wrong. Grandma and Grandpa knew who you were. That's why we're here today." My father's mouth opened to retort, but the judge lifted a hand, cutting him off. "The Alexanders anticipated this," Judge Henderson said, "and they were meticulous. Everything will be addressed, with witnesses present." I looked at the faces of my family, anger, shock, denial, and then at the allies around me, steady, calm, resolute. The lines had been drawn. And with the arrival of the judge, the police chief, and my grandparents' advisor, I knew this was no longer just a family squabble. This was war, with the law itself watching. The foyer still buzzed with the echoes of raised voices, but the sudden presence of Judge Henderson and Chief Williams had shifted the balance in the room. My father's jaw was tight, his fists clenched, yet the confidence that usually radiated from him seemed to falter under their steady gazes. Judge Henderson cleared his throat. "We will proceed in order. This is not a shouting match. This is about honoring Harold and Elizabeth Alexander's wishes." Matthew stepped forward, leather portfolio in hand. "Your parents anticipated today, Richard. They knew you and others might challenge their decisions. They left documentation, witnesses, records, and all of that will be entered into evidence should you choose to contest." Dad sneered. "Documentation can be forged. We'll prove Natalie manipulated them." Before Matthew could reply, Rosa Martinez stepped to the front. She held a slim tablet in her hand, screen glowing. Her voice was steady, businesslike. In 2012, Richard borrowed $200,000 from Alexander Logistics to fund a vacation home in Aspen. It was documented as a loan, yet never repaid. Harold and Elizabeth forgave it quietly, though they could have pursued legal recovery. The records are here. Signatures, dates, canceled checks. She tapped the tablet, the figures bright for all to see. My father's face darkened. "That was a private arrangement." "Not private," Rosa countered. "Business. And it illustrates a pattern. Taking without giving." Uncle Steve shifted uneasily in the corner. Aunt Pam's face flushed red, but she said nothing. Next, Thomas Jang opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I was their financial advisor for over 20 years. In 2016, Richard attempted an unauthorized transfer from his parents' retirement account. When the bank flagged it, he claimed it was an error. I have the reports. And in 2018, there was a forged check, Elizabeth's signature, though she immediately disputed it. That matter was dropped only because they did not want scandal. Gasps filled the room. My mother's perfectly painted lips parted, words failing her. Jason shifted uncomfortably, sunglasses perched on his head like a careless crown. Chief Williams spoke for the first time, her tone clipped. Forgery, unauthorized transfer, attempted fraud. Any one of those could have resulted in criminal charges. My father's face blanched. Then Carlos stepped forward, hat in hand, but his voice carried with weight. After the funeral, Richard and Jason entered this home without permission. They removed valuables, watches, jewelry, electronics. I updated the security system last year. It recorded everything. The footage has been archived and copied. It's all time-stamped. Jason laughed nervously. That's ridiculous. We were grieving. Grieving doesn't excuse theft, Matthew said coldly. Dorothy, her cardigan buttoned neatly, came next. Her voice wavered, but her words cut sharper than steel. Mrs. Elizabeth kept journals, decades of them. Every visit, every slight, every demand was written down. I have read the pages myself. She described Richard's anger when denied money, Jason's endless pitches, Diane's disdain for their modest home, and Natalie's quiet love. The meals, the phone lessons, the Sunday dinners, they saw it all. She lifted one of the journals, pages filled with graceful handwriting. Elizabeth's voice lives here. No one can deny it. Aunt Pam crossed her arms, eyes narrow. All lies. Natalie fed them stories to turn them against us. Judge Henderson shook his head. I have reviewed several of these journals myself. There was no manipulation. Their reasoning was consistent, meticulous, and entirely their own. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only when Matthew retrieved one final envelope from his case. He handed it to my mother. These are text messages and emails, he said, documented over the past decade. They include requests for money, disparaging remarks about Harold and Elizabeth, and threats to withdraw affection if money was not given. If you contest this will, these records become public. That is your choice. My mother's hands trembled as she scanned the first page. Her face drained of color. She dropped the envelope as if it burned. Jason grabbed his copy, flipping through. His bravado faltered when he hit the text he'd sent me just last night. Better not try to stop us, or things will get ugly. Chief Williams' eyes narrowed. That message alone qualifies as criminal intimidation. If Natalie pursues it, we will act. For once, Jason was silent. I stood in the middle of it all, heart pounding, listening as piece after piece of evidence fell like stones in a wall around me. My family, who had stormed in so certain of victory, looked suddenly small, diminished under the weight of truth. The silence stretched. I took a breath. My voice shook at first, but steadied as I spoke. I didn't ask for any of this, but Grandma and Grandpa chose me. They trusted me to carry their legacy, not because of money, but because of values. I will honor them. I will not sign away their work, their lives, their love. I will keep the estate exactly as they wished. The words hung in the air. My father glared at me, but the fire had dimmed in his eyes. This isn't over, he muttered. Actually, Richard, Judge Henderson replied, his voice calm and absolute, it is. Their wishes are clear. The evidence is overwhelming. Any court in this county would uphold the will. One by one, the fight drained from them. Uncle Steve was the first to break, flipping through his envelope with pale hands. He touched Aunt Pam's arm softly. We should go. We can't win this. She shook him off angrily, but her silence said enough. My mother tried one last time, voice trembling with desperation. Natalie, we're family. You don't understand what you're doing. I cut her off. No, you don't understand. Family isn't about taking. It's about love, respect. You've shown me neither. Jason shoved his papers back into the envelope, eyes burning with hatred. You'll regret this, he spat, brushing past me. Perhaps, I said quietly. But not today. They filed out slowly. Defeated, their polished shoes clicking against the hardwood. The slam of the front door reverberated like thunder. The house seemed to exhale once they were gone. Dorothy returned to the kitchen, brewing fresh coffee as if to wash away the stench of bitterness. Rosa gathered her laptop, nodding at me with quiet approval. Carlos closed the front door firmly, locking it with steady hands. But I stood frozen in the center of the room, a strange hollowness spreading in my chest. I had won. I had defended my grandparents' legacy. The will stood firm. The threats had dissolved. Yet instead of triumph, I felt only emptiness. My family had retreated, yes, but in their eyes I had become the enemy, an exile. I looked at the dining table, now covered with journals, papers, evidence of love and betrayal intertwined. My grandparents had built protections, an army of allies, a fortress of truth. But in doing so, they had also revealed a devastating truth. The people who should have been my family had never really been mine. The room was full of supporters, yet I felt achingly alone. And as the last car disappeared down the driveway, silence pressing against the walls, I knew this fight was far from over. Because winning didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. 6 months passed in a blur of paperwork, board meetings, and long nights spent learning what my grandparents had left me. At first, every signature on a document, every meeting with an advisor, felt heavy, like I was carrying their ghosts on my shoulders. But slowly, the weight shifted. It became purpose. With Matthew's guidance, I established the Elizabeth and Harold Alexander Foundation for Education. $10 million went straight into programs my grandparents had always dreamed of funding: scholarships, arts programs, vocational training for students who might otherwise be left behind. And though many assumed I would leave teaching now that I was wealthy, I stayed at Sunshine Elementary. My classroom became brighter than ever. We had new books, fresh art supplies, tablets that actually worked, and a snack program so no child went hungry during the day. On winter mornings, I kept a closet of coats for kids who showed up shivering. Those gestures cost little in the scope of my inheritance, but they mattered more than anything. Alexander Logistics continued under Rosa's mentorship. I didn't take a direct management role, but I insisted the company uphold my grandparents' values: profit sharing for employees, generous retirement benefits, treating people with dignity. The business thrived, not in spite of generosity, but because of it. Their house, once unbearably empty, slowly became a home again. Carlos helped me renovate the basement into a community room for tutoring and foundation events. Dorothy still came by 3 times a week, humming as she polished wood and baked bread. Sundays became dinners again, not with my parents, but with Rosa, Carlos's family, Matthew, neighbors, and employees who had loved my grandparents. I realized then I hadn't lost family. I had simply found a new one. Still, there were moments when grief crept in, when I longed for the warmth of Grandma's hands or Grandpa's off-key whistle. On a crisp autumn morning, I visited their graves for the first time since the funeral. The trees overhead blazed with color, gold and scarlet leaves swirling in the breeze. I placed fresh flowers on the grass and sat on the bench nearby. "I'm trying my best," I whispered. "The foundation is helping kids. Rosa says the company is stronger than ever. Your employees still talk about you with respect, and I'm still teaching." A breeze rustled the branches above, scattering leaves at my feet. For the first time, instead of emptiness, I felt peace. The following week, the foundation hosted its first scholarship ceremony. 20 students, bright, determined, many the first in their families to dream of college, stood on stage clutching certificates that represented futures rewritten. One girl, Maria Vasquez, hugged me afterward, tears shining. "No one in my family has ever gone to college," she said. "Now my little brothers know it's possible." In her eyes, I saw myself at 17, hopeful but uncertain, saved only because my grandparents had believed in me. And I knew in that moment this was the true inheritance. Not the millions, not the houses, but the chance to multiply kindness, to carry forward the values Harold and Elizabeth had lived by. Money had revealed the ugliest parts of my parents and brother, but it also revealed something else: the power of community, the love my grandparents had quietly built, the ripple effect of their choices. That was what endured. That was what mattered. As I stood at the podium that evening, looking out at rows of young faces filled with hope, I felt my grandparents beside me, not in body, but in every smile, every opportunity, every seed of change planted. And now I want to turn to you. Maybe you've never faced a battle over inheritance, but perhaps you've felt the sting of family, choosing pride or greed over love. Maybe you've had to stand alone, clinging to your values when it would have been easier to give in. I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments. I promise, someone else needs to hear it too. And if my journey resonated with you, if it gave you strength or reminded you of what really matters, please like this video, subscribe to Family Power Stories, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to stand firm. Because family isn't defined by who demands a seat at the table. Family is built by love, by respect, and by the legacies we choose to carry forward. And that, more than any fortune, is worth protecting.